So I've completed my 1 by 1 ribbing and I'm about to do my tubular bind off. I love this bind off because it's so smooth and round and it looks perfect on any kind of exposed edge as trim. It's also super elastic, so I like to use it for projects like hats and mitts and socks, any place where you'd like to have a nice round edge, but also have the stretch to get it on and off. This is a sewn bind off, so you'll need a tapestry needle to complete it. And you're going to cut your yarn, leaving about 4 times the circumference of the thing that it is that you've made. So I wrapped my yarn about 4 times around my swatch, and then I cut the yarn to make sure that I'd have enough for binding off. All right, I'm going to thread my needle and we'll get started. A sewn bind off means that you're basically threading the yarn through the stitches, and in this case we need to thread it through each stitch twice. So for example, if I show you this knit stitch that's on the first knit stitch that's on the needle here, you might be able to see that, or just look at your own knitting to see that there are 2 legs. It's a loop pulled through a loop, but each loop has 2 legs. So the yarn has gone into the loop and then it's going out of the loop. So we say that the yarn has gone into and out of each loop 2 times. And so in this sewn bind off, we have to do that as well. So to get started, what we're going to do is a setup. And that means we're going to put the yarn through each of the first 2 loops 1 time. And then as we start to do the sewn bind off, we'll end up putting it through once and then a second time, and then you know it's safe to take it off the needles. What we're doing here is we're combining knit stitches with knit stitches and purl stitches with purl stitches. So we're going to do the setup on the first 2 stitches, the knit stitch and the purl stitch, but from then on we'll be joining knit stitches to knit stitches and purl stitches to purl stitches. To get started then, I'm going to insert my wool needle into the first knit stitch purlwise, or you could think of this as from the right to the left. I'm going to insert that tapestry needle into the base of the stitch, or just under the needle, and draw the yarn through. So it's coming from where I last left off, my last knitted stitch. It's going through the first knit stitch on the next needle purlwise, and I'm leaving it on. Now I need to put it through the next stitch, the purl stitch. I need to do it knitwise. And so there's a little complicated, no, it's not complicated, but there's a little maneuver that we do here to get your tapestry needle into the right place. So tilting your needles forward, insert your wool needle between the first 2 stitches. So to the left of the knit stitch, to the right of the purl stitch, insert and pull the yarn through to the front of your work. And that puts the yarn in the right place for the next maneuver, which is, oh, I got a little fuzzy here. I'm just going to pick at it for a second. um, to insert the tapestry needle knitwise into the purl stitch. So let's do that. I'm going from the left to the right, or you could say I'm inserting the tapestry needle as if to knit. I'm drawing the yarn through and just making sure that it doesn't get hooked over the needle tip. So I've inserted the yarn 1 time through the knit stitch and the purl stitch. Now we'll begin our grafting. So we're going to graft knit stitches to knit stitches. And the way we do this is to start with the first stitch on the needle and insert your tapestry needle from the left to the right, or as if to knit. You're going to draw the yarn through, being careful not to catch that loop. It always happens on another point of your needle. So just make sure that it's not being caught up on anything, your fingers or your needles. Now we can take that stitch off because the yarn has gone through 2 times. We're going to skip the purl stitch that's coming up on the needle next, and we're going to work on the next knit stitch. It's the second stitch on the needle, and we're going to do what we did in the setup, which is to insert the tapestry needle purlwise or from the right to the left through the front of the stitch and draw the yarn through. Leave that stitch on the needle. I mean, it can't come off anyway, there's a purl stitch in front of it. Now we're going to deal with the purl stitches and join them together. So I'm inserting my tapestry needle in that purl stitch that's first on the needle now. I'm inserting it from the right to the left or purlwise and drawing the yarn through. Once I've drawn the yarn through, I can pop that stitch off the needle. And now I'm going to work on the next purl stitch, so it's just to the left of the knit stitch. And remember, this is the one where we have to do that funky thing with the tapestry needle. So we're going to insert the tapestry needle between the knit stitch and the purl stitch and pull the yarn to the front of the work, kind of like where it would be if we were purling. And then you're going to put the yarn, the tapestry needle, into the purl stitch as if to knit, or from the left to the right through the front of the stitch and draw the yarn through. And again, we leave that one on the needles, have no choice. So the first stitch, so now we've got the first stitch is a knit stitch, the third stitch is a knit stitch, and we're going to join them together. So I'm going to insert my tapestry needle as if to knit, or from the left to the right, draw the yarn through and pop that stitch off the needle. And now I'm going to make sure the yarn goes through the next knit stitch, so skipping over the purl stitch, as if to purl, from the right to the left, draw the yarn through and leave it on the needle. Now for the purl stitch, I'm going to join the purl stitches together, so I'm going to work on the first purl stitch, going into the stitch as if to purl, or from the right to the left through the front of the stitch, draw the yarn through, and I can pop it off the needle when I'm done, because that's its second pass and it's the first stitch on the needle. Now I need to secure the second purl stitch, so again, bring your tapestry needle through from the back, pull the yarn through, and once you've got the yarn through, you can insert the tapestry needle knitwise or from the left to the right and pull the yarn through, leaving that stitch on the needle. And you can see how you're even just doing the first, 4 stitches, you can see how the edge is starting to roll over and it looks really nice and neat. All right, I'm going to speed things up a little bit now. We're going to work these 2 knit stitches together. I've got it in position 1 and position 3, or stitch 1 and stitch 3 are the knit stitches. I'm going to insert my tapestry needle as if to knit in the first stitch, and then as if to purl in the third stitch. So let's start by doing that. I'm going to insert my tapestry needle knitwise and pull the stitch off at the same time, and then purlwise into the next knit stitch, but leave that one on the needle. Same thing for the purl stitches. We're going to begin by inserting purlwise into the first stitch, and then knitwise into the next purl stitch, which is in the third position. So insert your tapestry needle and take the stitch right off the needle and draw the yarn through, and then bring your tapestry needle through from the back to the front in between the knit and purl stitch and insert it knitwise into the purl stitch and draw the yarn through. You can make these motions more fluid as you go. So now we're back to knit stitches. I'm going to join the first knit stitch to the third knit stitch. So insert your tapestry needle knitwise into the first stitch, pull it off the needle, and then insert your tapestry needle into the third knit stitch or the second knit stitch purlwise, and now you can draw the yarn through at the same time. And then for the purl stitch, insert purlwise, drop the stitch off the needle, insert your tapestry needle in between the next 2 stitches and pull it through and pull the yarn through at the same time, and then into the next purl stitch as if to knit, draw the yarn through and snug it up just a little bit. All right, so I'm thinking knit off, purl on, just working on the knit stitches alone. And then I'm saying to myself, purl off, knit on. So the only thing you have to really remember here is that the tapestry needle has to go in between those next two stitches before you do your knit on. Knit off, purl on for the knit stitches, purl off, insert the tapestry needle between the next two stitches, and knit on. Keep that mantra going through your head and test the elasticity as you go along. You want to make sure that your bind off is not too tight or too loose. But as I work my way around, I just think to myself, knit off, purl on, that's the knit stitches. And the off means take it off, and the on means leave it on. And then purl off and knit on, just remembering that that tapestry needle needs to come in between the stitches before you can do your knit on component. And I just think those to myself as I go. All right, so I've worked my way doing my tubular bind off until I've worked the last two stitches on my double pointed needle, and I've put my yarn through these. They're both in the on position. The yarn's gone through them once, but what do I do now? So the quick answer is just transfer those stitches over to your next needle tip. If you're doing magic loop or two circulars, you're going to do exactly the same thing. Just transfer those two stitches over to your next needle tip, and you'll see that the yarn is already coming out of the purl stitch. You've gone through it once already. So just carry on. When you get to the last two stitches like I am here, you're just going to finish off by doing your on part. So I've knit on my last purl stitch there, and now I just have two stitches left on my needle. And so you may be wondering, what do I do now? And it's simply the off part. So I'm going to take that first knit stitch and I'm going to knit it off, and I'm going to insert my tapestry needle into the purl stitch, and I'm going to purl it on and just draw my yarn through those last two stitches, and I'm done my tubular bind off. Now, when we work in the round, you end up with a spiral, so no matter how you cast off, you're always going to end up with a higher edge on the left, on the right than you do on the left. So how I even out that jog is to insert my tapestry needle under the two legs of the knit stitch just to the left of where I've cast off or bound off there, and I'm going to draw the yarn through those two legs of the knit stitch, and then pull the yarn up is just the tiniest bit of a hole. So I'm just going to grab the edge of the yarn back towards where my yarn is coming out of. I'm just going to stick my needle in there and snug things up, and you'll see that everything just kind of levels off. It makes a nice little ending. And I'll turn my edging inside out, and I'm just going to weave that tail that I've got through the knit, or one of the knit legs on the ribbing on the inside of my work. I'll weave in the rest of the tail later, but you can see that that really just fixes that jog nicely. And of course, once you block it, wash and lay flat to dry, you'll find that it evens out even more. And that's it.